I recently read an article about the best tips that parents and I guess teachers or just people give about interacting and raising children or something like that. I forget exactly what the context was, but the main thing that it said, one of the things that it said was, don't criticize the negative, but praise the positive. Meaning, instead of pointing out the bad stuff, like, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? At least for little kids, what they say is you can point out the good stuff by saying, let's say there was like a whole bunch of them and one of them was doing well. You would say something like, oh, I like how Sally is sitting down, nice and quiet and ready and paying attention, et cetera, et cetera. And then apparently if any child hears that's like around, they'll like rush and then sit and then do exactly what Sally was doing. This is actually something I witnessed firsthand a couple years ago at summer camp through Deacon Helen. She's sitting right there. She's a teacher, so she knows these kind of like teaching things. And she actually did this. Like there was one, Chodombu student or something, or Unionbu student is doing. And she's like, oh, I like how. And then it happened. Like I saw it with my own eyes. I was like, man, that's like amazing, right? That they would actually do it, like sit properly and wait and et cetera, et cetera. Because I would say that most people want to do things properly. I think we all genuinely want to do things right and properly. They just don't know how sometimes. And, we just kind of go with the flow of things, etc. And so there's just something about seeing an example of someone doing it right that definitely helps us as humans. And so today we'll take a look at 3 wonderful encounters that Jesus has with people. And we'll see how they did it right, how they responded, and hopefully through that we can learn, how we too are to react if we find ourselves in that same situation. We continue today in our series of the book of Matthew. For the past few months we've worked through the Sermon on the Mount. Last week we finished it, and as Scripture says in the beginning of chapter 8, after Jesus preaches the Sermon on the mountain, he comes down from the mountain. And as he's coming down the mountain, the first thing that happens next is a leper approaches him. A leper kneels before him and starts to engage Jesus in conversation. Now bear in mind, in the Jewish community, a person who has leprosy, they are not allowed to have any interactions with anybody else, really. We know that this leper was Jewish because later on Jesus tells him, I'll go to the priest, right? And obviously that's something that a Jewish person would do. But in the Jewish culture, you do not engage or interact with people who have leprosy because they are ceremonially unclean. They are unclean. As a leper, you were outcasted. You were set aside. You were not allowed to come into contact with the people of God. You were put out there on the outskirts. You're not allowed in the temple. You're not allowed even to come near God, close to God, for you are unclean. You just had to live your whole life, as long as you had leprosy, on the outskirts of the people of God, separated from God and his people, because you were unclean. You stayed out. You stayed out until you were clean, which for most lepers, that did not happen. You just lived this life of just outcastness. So it's a really hard life to live. And so this leper, he's there. He does not have access to God, right? He's not allowed into the temple. He's not allowed near the people of God, for he's unclean. Essentially, his unholiness, his uncleanliness is manifested outwardly through his skin disease. Because of that, he can't approach God because he's unclean. This leper, this unclean person who had no access to God himself, comes to Jesus, who is God. And here he actually gets access to God now in the person of Jesus Christ. When you just think of that encounter, think of that moment where this leper speaks to God himself. Can there be a greater gospel message here? That sinners can come to the feet of Jesus, kneel before him and say, Lord, as this leper does. Can there be a greater joy for sinners like us to hear this great news that we can come to the feet of Jesus. We can come to God himself. We who were separated from him, who were unclean, unholy, can come freely to Jesus and proclaim, Lord, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. Just like this leper, having this unfettered access to God. This leper comes to him and says, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And in that one statement, there's just so much that is such an incredible statement of faith. First, Lord, acknowledging who Jesus is. Second, if you will. If it is in your will. Perhaps this leper a few moments ago, right? They're on the mountain and they're coming down. And maybe this leper was in that crowd. It was a great crowd. Maybe he was there during that teaching of the Sermon on the Mount, during the preaching. Maybe he heard from chapter 6, hearing the Lord's Prayer. Thy will be done. Right? If you will it to be done, you can make me clean. This is his understanding of who Jesus is. I know that you have this power, Lord. I know that you have this authority to make me clean. To do this only if you will. It's an incredible statement of faith. Jesus, in this encounter, as his leper is kneeling before him, hears this, and he does something incredible, something almost crazy. He reaches out and he touches the leper. He touches. Realize that in the Jewish context, touching someone or coming into contact with someone who is a leper, who is unclean, makes you yourself unclean. If you touch anything, that's unclean. And then you have to isolate yourself from the people of God. And you have to wait a set time period outside of the camp. You have to go through the whole purification ritual. You have to sacrifice an animal at the altar. And then after doing all of that, then you can rejoin the community, the covenant community. Even if this happens accidentally, like you just walked and this leper came out of nowhere and he touched you, made you unclean. Or if you touched a dead animal or something, made you unclean. And so for Jesus to actively, consciously reach out his hand and place it on the leper, for a Jewish person, let's say they were Jewish people, the disciples must have been Jesus, slow motion, no, what are you doing, Jesus? Do not touch that leper. Do you understand what's about to happen? You're going to be unclean if you do this. But that's not what happens. Jesus says, yes, I will. I will it to be clean. And boom, he's clean. Immediately his leprosy is cured. It's gone. It's just so much beautiful gospel there, right? Right, this leprosy, which we can use to represent sin, comes into direct contact with Jesus. But Jesus doesn't become unclean. Jesus doesn't become sinful. But it's the opposite. The leper becomes clean. It's this amazing, great exchange. This upside down, unexpected outcome. Jesus knows what he's doing. He knows this whole encounter. He knew from the get-go exactly what was going to happen as he touches this leper, that he does not become unclean, but the leper becomes clean. For that is what Jesus Christ has come to do. Jesus knows what he's doing. He tells the leper after this all happened, he says, not to tell anyone. Don't tell anyone anything, but first go to the priest to show him that your leprosy has been cured, because it can only be cured by God. This is to fulfill Leviticus 14:2. This is what actually the Old Testament says, what the law of God says. It says, this shall be the law of the leprous person for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest. And so Jesus is making sure that everything that happened up till now is done on the up and up. Jesus has come to fulfill every law of God perfectly, and so he does that right here. And so in this incredible encounter of a leprous person who is unclean, who is an outcast, who is separated from God, in the person of Jesus Christ, we see such a beautiful picture of the gospel. We see this incredible faith this leper has in Christ. He also knows that it's Jesus' prerogative, it's Jesus' right to cure or not. And with either outcome, as the leper prays as the leper asks of Jesus, if you will, it shows that he's ready. No matter what happens, it is a decision made by the Lord. And so we see that in his statement, that he's okay with either outcome. That's the first person that we see in today's passage. The second person that we see today of healing, I would say is even in a more incredible statement of faith is a centurion. A centurion, this is a Roman soldier. If you remember back during Passion Week about a month ago, on Good Friday, it was a Roman centurion who proclaims, after seeing Jesus Christ dying and darkness and earthquake and all of these things happen, it's a centurion who was there at the crucifixion who proclaims that Jesus was truly the Son of God. I don't know if it's the same. I don't think it's the same centurion. It's not, definitely not. But for a Jewish person, the Romans are enemies. They are not your friend. They are the ones who are oppressing us. They're waiting for a Messiah, a political Messiah, to come and free them from this Roman oppression. These Romans are Gentiles. And it's here that we see that Matthew, he's continuing to lay the groundwork. The gospel is not just for the Jew, also for the Gentile. The centurion soldier appeals to Jesus, comes to Jesus, and appeals on behalf of his servant. And already there's so much going on that because a centurion soldier, he's a man who under him, there's about 100 other soldiers. And so, you're pretty high up there. You're not like a general who probably has centurions under him, but a centurion is, you're high enough that you have servants and soldiers under you. And so the fact that this centurion, who is a master of servants, he's a master and he has servants under him, soldiers under him, he comes to Jesus on behalf of his servant. Like, that's like kind of unheard of, that the master of all these people would come to Jesus for a lowly servant. But it already shows the centurion's understanding. Right? He knows who Jesus is. He has an incredible faith in Jesus. He says, Jesus, I have a servant at home, and he is paralyzed and he's suffering terribly. Would you heal him? And Jesus, hearing this, immediately replies, yes, let's go. Let's go right now and heal him. I'm going to come and heal him straight up. Not, let me go and scope the situation. Let me go walk with you all the way those miles and, work through and analyze and deliberate on the proper medicine and the medication that needs to be given out. But no, I'm coming now to heal him. Let's go. I'm going to heal him. It's a done deal in Jesus' mind. There's no question about it. Because he's God. He knows, he can do it. The centurion hearing this, realizing that Jesus is going to come to his house, replies back with an incredible response. He says, Lord, the same thing that the leper said, Lord. The centurion soldier, commander of 100 soldiers, has servants under him, calls Jesus Lord. That's what he says next. That really shows that he knows his place in this encounter between him and God and Jesus. He says, I'm not even worthy to have you come under my roof. I'm not even worthy. Bear in mind, he's probably not poor. He's a centurion. He has servants. He has soldiers under him. His house is probably nice, right? It's probably like, it's okay. It's not a mansion, but it's probably nice enough, at least compared to Jesus, who says he has no place to put his head, which we'll go through next week in the cost of following Christ. But he says he's not even worthy. He's not even worthy. Not my servant is not worthy, my soldiers are not worthy, but I am not worthy. He knows his place as he interacts with God himself. It's this incredible understanding of who we are before God. Really, that in the end, truly, we are just creation. creatures whom the Creator created. Creation that disobeyed God. And even now, we treat God as if He's our creation, or as if He's here to do our bidding, our will. Do you realize that we're not even worthy? We're definitely not worthy to be in the presence of God. As wretched, dead in our transgressions, sinners. That the only reason that you're even able to be here in this place sitting before God Himself, the only reason we have any bearing with God is because of His incredible love for us, shown to us in the person of Jesus Christ. Realize Jesus, He is in His full rights before this centurion to be like, yes, you are right. You are right. You are not worthy at all for me to come even near, for even me to be speaking to you. You're not worthy. You're a sinner. Your servant's a sinner. All the soldiers under you are sinners. Every single person I meet is a sinner that needs or should and deserves to spend